Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols.
Oh, wow. Man and his symbols.
Yeah. It's all about, you know how these universal symbols kind of pop up from our unconscious and like shape how we experience the world.
Yeah.
Dreams, myths, art, even just those weird little moments in everyday life that feel super meaningful.
Right, right.
So I've been going through your notes, and it seems like you're particularly interested in this whole idea of the anima and how it connects to the larger world of archetypes.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how these universal patterns play out, not just on like a grand scale, but also in our own relationships.
Yeah.
And personal growth.
Yeah. I mean, who isn't at least a little intrigued by the idea of this hidden feminine figure influencing a man's psyche?
Totally. It's like a whole psychological thriller.
Yeah.
Playing out right inside our minds.
All right. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is this anima? I mean,
Okay.
it's not about any specific woman.
Right.
It's more like this primal image of woman that lives in the male unconscious.
Right. Exactly. Think of it like an archetype, a blueprint. Hardwired into the male psyche throughout history, it shapes, how men perceive and interact with the feminine, both within themselves and in the world around them.
Okay. Okay, so like in movies and myths, we see this manifested as the femme fatale, right?
Totally. A classic example.
Like Salome demanding John the Baptist's head.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a powerful
Kind
and dangerous
Yeah.
female figure.
Right. Jung actually uses her as an example in the book, doesn't he?
He does. He does. She embodies both the allure and that potential destructiveness of the anima. But that's the thing with these archetypes. They have this dual nature. They can be a source of creativity and inspiration, guiding us towards wholeness. But they can also become super destructive when they're repressed or projected onto others in unhealthy ways.
It's kind of this potent energy that needs to be acknowledged and integrated,
Right.
not just like indulged or ignored.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about like being attracted to women. It's also about a man's relationship with his own feminine qualities, intuition, emotion, creativity, that kind of stuff.
That makes me think of Dante's Divine Comedy, where Beatrice guides him through hell and purgatory. It's almost like the anima as a spiritual guide,
Yeah.
but one with a serious dark side.
Right, right. And Jung actually goes into some pretty intense examples of this shadow side in the book.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, he talks about how the anima shadow can manifest in these crude erotic fantasies. He even brings up things like striptease culture as examples of how, how that side of the anima can lead to objectification and unhealthy relationships.
Speaking of unhealthy relationships, what about that film, The Blue Angel, that Jung talks about, where the professor just completely loses it over this cabaret singer?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like a cautionary tale of what can happen when we let the yard, that shadow side of the anima just run wild.
Totally. So we've been talking about the anima as this kind of singular thing.
Yeah.
But Jung actually outlines different stages of anima development.
Right.
It's not a static image. It evolves over time as a man matures.
Exactly. Early on, it might be very tied to those, primal instincts. Like in that Gauguin painting of the primitive woman.
Okay, I see.
And later it shifts to a more romanticized ideal of beauty, like those Renaissance portraits of women. They were practically worshipped for their looks, like, Helen of Troy, launching 1,000 ships and all that.
Right.
And as a man continues to grow, the anima can take on a more spiritual dimension, embodying things like wisdom and compassion. Jung actually uses the Virgin Mary as an example of this stage, but even that can be kind of loaded.
Totally. And it's interesting because even a figure like the Virgin Mary still ties into that broader archetype of the Great Mother, which pops up in cultures all over the world. I mean, that 15th century French miniature Jung mentions with Mary and the Holy Trinity, it shows just how universal this archetype really is.
Exactly. Exactly. And just to be clear, this whole anima thing isn't just a man thing.
Really. So women have their own inner archetypes at play, too.
Of course they do. Women have the animus, the masculine archetype in their unconscious, influencing their relationships with men and their own masculine qualities.
Okay, so basically we're all walking around with these hidden figures, influencing our every thought and feeling.
Pretty much. Jung wasn't afraid to dive deep into the human psyche.
He wasn't. And speaking of diving deep, let's talk about those broader archetypes, these universal patterns that go beyond gender. Jung believed they're kind of like the building blocks of something called the collective unconscious.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. He saw it as this shared reservoir of human experience that transcends individual cultures and time periods. It's what makes those ancient myths and symbols resonate with us, even today.
Okay. I need an example. Something that really shows how these archetypes give the world meaning.
All right. How about the Chinese creation myth of Pangku? It's wild. His body becomes the mountains, his tears the rivers, his eyes the sun and moon.
Whoa. That's intense. I can already see how this deep dive is going to change the way I see everything.
Right.
But before we go too far down the rabbit hole, maybe we should talk about the self, which Jung considered the central archetype, representing wholeness and the journey of individuation.
Yes, good point. The self is like this inner compass, guiding us toward becoming who we're truly meant to be. It's not always an easy journey, but it's the one that ultimately gives our lives meaning and purpose.
Okay. And the book says that this self often pops up in our dreams, disguised as helpful figures, like animals or even famous people. It's like our unconscious is sending us these coded messages.
Exactly. He gives the example of the magical fox from that fairy tale. And even someone like Albert Schweitzer, these figures, even though they're drawn from our personal experiences, they often have this numinous quality to them, pointing us towards that path of individuation. But as we said, it's not always a walk in the park.
More like a trek through a dark, tangled forest sometimes.
Yeah.
Remember that Iranian fairy tale, The Secret of the Bath Badgered?
Yeah.
Gotta go through all these crazy trials inside a symbolic castle. Talk about confronting your inner demon.
Oh, yeah. And that's where Jung's emphasis on dreams comes in. He saw them as a direct line to the unconscious, a way for it to communicate with us and to guide us on this often challenging path. It's like that example in the book about Miss X's dream of the museum ship, described as a saving ark filled with living images, almost like a blueprint for navigating the unconscious.
Exactly. And it brings to another fascinating element in the book, modern art as a reflection of the collective psyche, especially in the 20th century. Hold on, are you saying like Picasso and Dali were tapping into the collective unconscious?
Jung would say yes. He argued that modern art reflects what he called a chthonic spirit, a connection to the earth and unconscious forces. It's a fascinating contrast to the more heavenly focus of earlier Christian art.
Wow. I never thought about it that way.
Right. Think about the raw energy and emotion in these, like a Kandinsky painting compared to, a Renaissance altarpiece. It's a totally different vibe.
That's fascinating. I'm starting to see how this book can unlock a whole new way of looking at everything, really. Art, dreams, mythology, even myself. This is what I call a deep dive.
It definitely is. And speaking of deep dives, we can't forget about the real-life example Jung uses to illustrate the process of individuation. The dreams of this guy, Henry. There are some seriously vivid details in there that I think will really resonate with you. Remember the mountain road, symbolizing the path to maturity.
And the G's. The humpbacked girl representing his undeveloped soul. And the recurring train station as a symbol of the self. Sounds like we're about to unravel a whole psychological mystery.
We are. And what's interesting is how these dream images connect back to those core archetypes we've been talking about. The mountain road speaks to, the challenges of growth, the humpbacked girl to this hidden potential, and the train station. Well, we'll get to that.
Ooh, the suspense is killing me. But before we delve into Henry's dreams, I'm curious, have you ever noticed similar, recurring motifs in your own dreams?
That's a good question. And one that probably deserves its own deep dive, don't you think?
Absolutely. But first, let's see what wisdom we can glean from Henry's unconscious adventures. I have a feeling we're just getting started.
Okay, so let's unpack some of these dream symbols that Jung analyzes in the book.
Okay.
Specifically from this guy, Henry. Remember, for Jung, dreams weren't just random firings in the brain.
Right.
They were a way for the unconscious to communicate. And boy, did Henry's unconscious have a lot to say.
Yeah, those dreams were like a psychological soap opera.
Yeah.
I was particularly drawn to that recurring image of the mountain road. Jung saw that as a symbol for the path to maturity, right?
Exactly. And the details make it even richer. On one side, there's this deep abyss representing the unknown, those unconscious forces pulling at him. And then on the other side, you have this rigid rock wall symbolizing the constraints of his conscious world.
Right.
It's like he's navigating between those two forces trying to find his way.
And what about those caves along the road? They were like these little pockets of refuge. Places where he could retreat from the intensity of the journey and connect with his inner world. I wonder if those represent those moments in our own lives where we need to step back and reflect.
Ooh, that's a good connection. Jung saw them as places where Henry could connect with his shadow side, those aspects of himself he might be repressing or denying. And remember that encounter with the prostitute in the cave,
Oh, yeah.
who later transforms into a saint?
Okay, that was wild. What did you make of that symbolic shift? I mean, from a prostitute to a saint. It's giving major Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde vibes.
Right. It speaks to that duality of the anima that we were talking about earlier. The prostitute represents that more primal instinctual side, while the saint embodies the spiritualized transcendent aspect. It's like Henry's grappling with both the alluring and the potentially dangerous aspects of his inner feminine.
And he's ultimately turned away from the saint, right? It's like he's not quite ready to embrace that spiritual dimension. He needs to deal with the messiness of the real world first.
Exactly. It highlights how individuation isn't about escaping reality. It's about integrating those unconscious contents into our everyday lives. And speaking of everyday life, remember that dream where Henry is at the train station? The one where he desperately needs to get to the city center but doesn't know how?
Oh, yeah, that one feels so relatable. Like that feeling of being stuck, wanting to move forward but not knowing which direction to take.
Yeah.
It makes me think of those times in my own life when I felt lost and uncertain about my purpose.
Right. It's that yearning for wholeness, that search for meaning that drives so many of us. And notice how the train station itself becomes a symbol of the self, that central archetype guiding us towards wholeness. And it's not some grand mystical place. It's an ordinary, everyday location.
Which makes it even more powerful, right? It's like Jung is saying that the path to wholeness isn't found in some far-off land, but in the mundane details of our everyday lives. What about that dream where Henry is playing cards, trying to decipher the meaning of unlived life?
That one's a bit more enigmatic, but so Jungian. It's like he's literally trying to make sense of the messages from his unconscious.
And it's his sister who helps him find that missing card, the 9 of spades. What's the significance of that?
Well, think about it. He's relying on his sister, a female figure, to unlock this crucial piece of the puzzle. It suggests he needs to integrate his feminine side, his anima, to truly understand himself.
Ooh, good catch. I'm seeing all these connections now. Okay, this next dream was truly bizarre.
Yeah.
4 ragged Chinese men show up.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Remember how those Chinese men challenge Henry to a game and he ends up getting injured by one of their long nails? It's almost like his rational Western ego is being confronted by this ancient Eastern wisdom, and he's not quite sure how to handle it.
And the fact that it's his shadow figure, the trapper, who ends up saving his life. Talk about a twist.
Right. It's a reminder that even the darkest, most rejected aspects of ourselves can hold the key to our salvation.
Okay, I need a moment to process all of that Chinese men shadow figures, long nails. Jung really knew how to weave a symbolic tapestry, didn't he?
He did. But we're not done yet. Remember that other recurring figure, the humpbacked girl? What was your take on her? I mean, she seemed pretty central to a lot of Henry's dreams.
She was definitely intriguing. Jung saw her as representing Henry's undeveloped soul, the part of him that's been neglected or even rejected.
But remember those fairy tales where the humpbacked girl turns out to be a beautiful princess in disguise? It's like the hump is a symbol of her hidden potential, the beauty waiting to be revealed.
Ooh, I like that. So it's not just about something being wrong with her, but more about what's hidden beneath the surface.
Exactly. And in Henry's dreams, she acts as a guide, trying to awaken his feelings through music, pulling him out of his hiding place. She's a reminder that even the most seemingly flawed or undesirable aspects of ourselves can hold incredible potential for growth.
It makes me wonder about all those times I've judged or rejected parts of myself, those shadow aspects I've tried to keep hidden. What if those parts actually hold the key to becoming more whole?
That's a powerful question, and it goes to the heart of what Jung is saying. Individuation is about embracing all of who we are, the light and the shadow, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and the unconscious.
So it's about becoming a more complete and integrated human being.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, right?
Totally. But it's the journey that matters, the process of confronting those hidden parts of ourselves and weaving them into the tapestry of our lives.
Speaking of journeys, what about that dream where Henry's traveling through South America and finally feels ready to return home? That one always struck me as a positive turning point.
Right. It's like this sense of coming full circle, of returning to oneself after a long and arduous journey. And notice how the city on the mountain becomes a symbol of the self, that inner center of wholeness. It's like Henry's finally ready to confront and integrate those deeper unconscious forces that have been shaping his life.
It's like he's reached a new level of self-awareness and acceptance. Okay, there's one more dream I have to ask about the one with Henry, his 4 friends, and the mysterious woman drinking from those different vessels. It felt like a scene straight out of a surrealist film.
It definitely has that dreamlike quality. And then, bam, the president of the republic shows up and well, you know.
Let's just say he relieved himself in a very unexpected way. It was shocking, but also kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
What do you think Jung was trying to convey with that image?
I think it speaks to the raw, untamed power of the unconscious, the way it can disrupt our comfortable assumptions and force us to confront those aspects of ourselves we'd rather not acknowledge. It's like no matter how much we try to control things, those primal energies will always find a way to express themselves.
And in this case, in a very messy and public way. But what's interesting is that this shocking act is followed by a profound shift. The next morning, everything's transformed into this serene, snowy landscape with a naked Negro standing in the middle of it all.
It's like the dream is showing us that even the most disruptive or seemingly negative experiences can lead to renewal and transformation.
And remember how Henry's friends are worried that the Negro will freeze in the cold? It's like they're still stuck in their old ways of thinking, while Henry, in a gesture of humility, offers him a box of matches.
That gesture is so powerful. The matches represent fire, a symbol of warmth, passion, and the life force. It's like Henry is finally acknowledging and honoring that primal energy, that part of himself he's been afraid of.
And by doing so, he creates a sense of connection and shared humanity. It's like he's finally integrating his shadow side and embracing his own wholeness.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most mind-blowing aspects of Jung's work, the connection between psychology and physics.
Wait, are we about to talk about quantum physics and the collective unconscious? Because I am so here for it.
You got it that. Jung was convinced that there's a deeper unity to reality, what he called the unus mundus, where mind and matter are not separate but two sides of the same coin.
Okay, that's a concept I'm going to need some time to wrap my head around. But it sounds amazing.
It is, and it raises so many questions about the nature of reality and the limits of our current scientific understanding. We're just scratching the surface.
Oh, we've explored the anima, delved into Henry's dreams. We even touched on that mind-bending connection between psychology and physics. Where do we go from here? What are some other ways to explore these Jungian ideas? It feels like, I don't know, we've opened up a whole new dimension of understanding.
Right. It's like we've been handed a map to this hidden world, and now we have to go explore it. One concept that might be interesting for you is this idea of synchronicity, you know, those meaningful coincidences that seem to defy all logic.
Ooh. Synchronicity. Like when you're thinking about someone, and then they call you out of the blue, or you keep seeing the same number everywhere. I've always found that stuff so fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Jung believed those weren't just, random occurrences, but actual glimpses into this deeper interconnectedness between our inner world and the outer world. He even suggested there might be a link between the unconscious and the structure of, inorganic matter, rocks, trees, that kind of stuff.
Hold on. Are you saying our minds are somehow connected to everything? That's pretty wild.
It is. It really challenges us to reconsider what we think we know about reality and the limits of. Our current scientific understanding, it's almost like we're peeking behind the curtain of the universe and seeing hints of this much grander design.
It's making me think about those recurring dream motifs we were talking about. What if they're not just random images? But reflections of some deeper universal pattern that's woven into the fabric of reality. Okay, I think I'm going down the rabbit hole here.
Embrace the rabbit hole. That's where the real discoveries happen. If you really want to dive into this stuff, Jung's book Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle is a great place to start.
Okay, add it to the reading list. I came into this deep dive thinking I had a decent grasp on Jungian psychology, but now I feel like I'm just scratching the surface. It's exciting, but also a little overwhelming.
That's the beauty of Jung's work. It's a constant process of unfolding, peeling back layers, discovering new depth. It's not about arriving at some definitive answer, but about embracing the mystery and continuing to ask questions.
Speaking of questions, there's one concept you mentioned earlier that I wanted to circle back to, the psychoid archetype. You said it suggests that archetypes aren't just psychological, but that they also have this physical aspect. Can you explain that a bit more?
It's a complex idea, but basically Jung proposed that archetypes have this quasi-material quality to them, meaning they can somehow influence events in the physical world. It ties back to that idea of the unus mundus, that fundamental unity between mind and matter.
Archetypes aren't just abstract ideas floating around in our head.
But actual forces that are shaping our reality. That's kind of terrifying. It is. It suggests that the line between the inner and outer world is is much blurrier than we think, and it opens up all these possibilities for how we understand ourselves and the universe around us, if you're up for a real challenge. Jung goes deeper into this in Mysterium Conjunctionis. Fair warning, it's not exactly light bedtime reading.
Challenge accepted. I'm definitely feeling inspired to dig into all of this and see where it leads. This deep dive has been amazing. It's like I've gained a whole new perspective on Jung's work and on my own inner journey.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep exploring those dreams, those synchronicities, those little whispers from the unconscious. They're always guiding you towards wholeness.
I will. And thanks for being such a brilliant guide on this journey. I've learned so much.
It was my pleasure. Remember, the journey of individuation, it's ongoing. Embrace the mystery. Keep asking questions. Trust that wisdom within. And hey, if you ever need another deep dive, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep into the world of Carl Jung. We'll see you on the other side of the unconscious.